Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Construct Innovate webinar series on innovation and entrepreneurship. This week, we're going to focus on innovation strategies in the construction and built environment. My name is Jamie Goggins. I'm Director of Construct Innovate. That's Ireland's National Research Centre for Construction Technology and Innovation. We're co-hosting this webinar series with Engineers Ireland West Region. So we're delighted to have three fantastic speakers today to talk to us about their innovation strategies within their respective organisations. So our first speaker is Sarah-Jane Pisciotti, and she's the Innovation and Design Director at Sisk Group. And she's going to talk about breaking new ground, which is Sisk's innovation strategy. She'll basically give a high-level overview of the group's strategy, focusing on some priority areas around sustainability and off-site construction. Then we have Ronan Lonergan and Tom Lowry. So Ronan is the design lead for pre-construction and innovation at Cairn Homes, and Tom is a senior technical manager at Cairn Homes. And they're going to talk about Cairn's strategic innovation approach in there and how they seek new and innovative ways to build. And then we have Robert Burns, who's the chief executive at Monaghan County Council, and he's going to give us from the local authority experience of innovation in construction. So, we're absolutely delighted. All speakers are, innovating in their own right. They're all part of organisations that value innovation and what innovation can bring to the organisation, but more so to society in general and what they deliver in that. So, without further ado, I'm going to, as the speakers present, please feel free to pose any questions you want in the Q&A function button. So you'll find the Q&A function button at the bottom of your screen. Pose the questions there. We'll deal with the Q&A at the end in there, or the speakers might actually respond to some of them online as well. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Sarah-Jane, and she's going to talk about breaking new ground, Sisk's innovative strategy. So over to you, Sarah-Jane.
Thank you so much, Jamie. I'll just take a moment to share my screen. Great. So it's lovely to be invited today, and thanks again to Construct Innovate and to Engineers Ireland to allow us to kind of collaborate here by sharing our individual strategies. I'm looking forward to hearing what the other speakers have to share, and also to give you a bit of an insight into some of the behind the scenes work that we're doing at Sisk to drive a new innovation strategy called Breaking New Ground across the group. So I'll just put that on the low volume while I can talk over it. So our CEO, Paul Brown, created the vision for this strategy at the beginning of 2023, and it was developed in collaboration with a large number of stakeholders across our business to really redefine how we go to work, encompassing everything from our people, our culture, our sustainability strategy, modern methods of construction, digital transformation, and all of this working together in tandem to, redefine how we build, and to help transform our industry so that it's a more attractive place to work for a larger cohort of people. But very importantly, to cascade these initiatives down through our business into all our sectors, all our geographies, and all our projects, so that every single person in Sisk is part of this story toward building a better tomorrow. Just to give you a little bit of overview on our business, for those of you who aren't familiar with Sisk, it's a large company, 2.4 billion is our latest turnover figure. It had substantial growth when I joined the company 4.5 years ago. It was around 1.8 billion. So it's quite strong in the face of a lot of challenges, which we've all witnessed over the last number of years, including inflation, material challenges, market volatility, of course, supply chain issues as well, and all in the face of climate change and indeed turmoil overseas. So how we are structured as a company is across Ireland, the UK, and data centres and life sciences. And we also have services businesses, which are both Vision Built, which is an offsite manufacturing company, and Sensory, who deliver facilities management, among other services. And all of our business units there are in light blue, and our support functions at the bottom. So our new purpose for our company is creating places for future generations. So before we really embarked upon this transformation strategy, we redefined our vision, our mission, and our purpose. And this purpose really rang true for so many of us and really, underpins why we go to work. The second important part of the strategic vision is being at the heart of change. When we mapped out the industry challenges, whether it's the climate change, new ways of working, evolving client needs, legislative demands, we really wanted to be at the center of change rather than seeing change as a threat, so that we could help drive progress faster. In 2020, we launched our sustainability roadmap, Building Today, Caring for Tomorrow. And this really sets the scene for what I'll now share, which is our 5 strategic priorities. It has 21 targets across 5 themes. It's aligned with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and it was driven from a materiality assessment that we carried out. So these are our 5 strategic priorities, which intertwine and are interdependent with our sustainability roadmap. And the first and most important is our people and culture strategy. I won't go into depth around that. The one that I'm mostly going to focus on today is modern methods of construction and net zero. But just at a high level, our people and culture strategy is absolutely fundamental to deliver all of the other elements of our strategy. It goes through everything from our entire employee life cycle, recruitment, onboarding, training, staff development, succession planning, and career maps for people, so that we can really retain the talent in our business and develop new skill sets that allows us to undertake this transformation. In terms of modern methods of construction, our vision is to reimagine the way we go to work, so that we can offer a flexible range of innovative offsite and on-site solutions to our clients. And in tandem with net zero, we're aiming to transform the mindset, culture, and capability of our entire business so that we can be leaders in the delivery of net zero buildings and infrastructure. And finally, digital transformation, which is a prerequisite to achieving the 2 above. We've got a very established digital project delivery team, but our digital transformation strategy even spans beyond that, including innovation funds, including new technologies, innovative tech, data architecture and infrastructure, knowledge management. So it's a really, really large strategy. I won't be covering digital transformation today. I think we need more than the 15 minutes that I've got. But the idea is that we will improve our performance and productivity by integrating cutting edge technologies and digital competencies. And all of this will set us in good stead to be able to have a high quality of earnings and reinvest those earnings back into the business so that we can continue to grow and to innovate. So I'll just jump into our modern methods of construction strategic priority, which is my core area of responsibility. I'd like to explain today how we're operationalizing this high level through collaboration within our business units, our functions, but also the outside industry. I'll go through how our services have been developed so that we can support the delivery of MMC, net zero, and circular economy. Describe what I mean by integrated sustainable solutions, and then just share a very short number of case studies which show some data coming out of the work that we're carrying out at present. So the first part of our design and innovation strategy, which really merges MMC and an element of net zero with our design strategy, is just the purpose of this is that we found when we started to develop our MMC strategy that it was so intertwined with design, it was so intertwined with early engagement, with sustainability, with low carbon products and technologies, that it didn't make sense to have separate pillars. So we intertwined those pillars and developed a team under my remit, which we're calling Integrated Sustainable Solutions. And this single team is a combination of expertise around MMC, carbon modelling, sustainable design, design management, innovation, research and development. And together we work and serve our business across all our geographies to try and drive awareness and increase adoption of these construction technologies and design ideas, as well as reduce carbon in the process. So this is just a snapshot of the team that I have around me who are able to support the business in driving these strategies forward. What we offer are MMC and design optioneering and optimization, whole life carbon measurement and carbon reduction services. And all of this is really backed by very in-depth research into materials, into our supply chain, procurement. So it's certainly not a surface level research, so that we're able to advise our clients and design teams on making informed decisions. It's very, very collaborative, and we work with our industry partners, with academia and our supply chain to develop solutions to address today's challenges. So we've really brought in new skill sets, particularly over the last year, to try and drive this strategy, and it is a growing team. It includes MMC integration leads, heads of sustainable design, and design management, as well as carbon management. So our service offering to our projects, of which we've 99 projects at present at Sisk, and we serve a large proportion of those. We start off with carbon modelling, so carrying out whole life cycle carbon assessments, either partial or full, working with design teams who've already developed those and really honing them into the detail with our supply chain. We carry out material research, both desktop research, also working with the likes of Trinity College Dublin, with whom we've won a grant via Construct Innovate to develop low carbon cement alternatives, which is really exciting and groundbreaking technology that will help us decarbonize concrete. We work on design and structural optimization, developing MMC solutions in all materials. So it's product agnostic, but it's driven by what our clients' design drivers are, value drivers are, and ultimately optimizing our logistics, our methodology, and increasing productivity on site. We then support projects to integrate those suggestions depending on the stage of their contract. Sometimes it's more challenging if we're engaged very late in the day. If we're engaged very early, it's far easier to be able to carry out MMC optioneering and design integration. But we do have a very large team of design managers, which I haven't shown, who help us with that activity. Both on all our projects have an element of MMC, and that team are skilled in civil, structural, architectural, mechanical, and electrical offsite integration. When we've developed these ideas, we then share case studies and knowledge across our business to really give the relevant lessons learned to our projects, so that they can learn and have that virtuous cycle of continuous improvement. And then working in the broader industry, and indeed with all our leadership teams, we drive awareness and upskilling through a range of bulletins that we produce, whether they're on carbon terminology, on cross-laminated timber, on steel procurement. It's extremely broad. So we're building up a library of information that can be used by anybody who cares to learn about these things and therefore upskill themselves. So some of the work that we have ongoing at the moment, haven't got images of everything, but very quick snapshot. We've built a cross-laminated timber demonstrator in Galway, and some of our listeners today might have visited that with us. Some of our clients and design teams have been down to really try and understand how we can help unlock some of the barriers to offsite timber construction in Ireland. We're developing a high level of data around MMC, not just in terms of the carbon reduction opportunities, but in terms of waste, in terms of productivity, data around labour reductions, as well as cost. So that's very rich data set for us to then be able to make decisions going forward around how we build. I've mentioned the Construct Innovate grant, and one other thing that we're doing is having a lot of material matters webinars. So we're bringing in experts, whether they're designers, whether they're experts in their field, in the supply chain, other companies, to help us really understand what's going on in the world and how we can integrate those ideas into our buildings. And lastly, we have a low carbon concrete forum, which brings together expertise around our business on engineering, on temporary works, on material science, as well as sustainable design and procurement. And together, this collaborative forum really hone in on that topic and are able to understand how we strategically can scale the use of low carbon concrete across all our businesses. Other forums in the pipeline are low carbon steel and obviously timber. So this is a growing forum which will have expertise at driving innovation. So I'm just nearing the end of my presentation, just a few more slides left. This case study, I just wanted to share some very simple graph. Well, I think it's simple, a very simple graph on what some of the outputs are of our MMC optioneering. So this was a very large commercial building in the UK attached to a stadium. And we looked at a large number, 13 options that we looked at for the commercial building to understand how could we build this better, faster, with less carbon. The baseline that you can see there in blue is a traditional RC frame. And every single other option that we looked at performed better in terms of carbon as against that RC frame. And we don't just look at materials, we look at the optimization of the slab, optimization of the grid, the downstand beams, the MEP strategy, the risers, etc. How we can really, structurally optimize the solution. And we were then able to select a better performing frame and work with our design teams to help integrate a change of structural approach into the design. Again, can only be done at an early stage in the design. Very interestingly, when we went down to the supply chain, the option that we selected was actually upwards of 7% less expensive than what had been tabled. So I think there's some interesting cost data coming out around the efficiency of MMC as well. This is an example of a different project that we looked at the embodied carbon against each of the elements. And through procurement alone, we were able to optimize the performance in terms of carbon reduction of each of those elements. So really how we buy and how we specify can have an enormous impact. And I think this is why collaboration is so important between the contracting fraternity with the design teams, because we have a lot to bring in terms of knowledge of our supply chains and selection of products and materials that can really help optimize designs. This is another example of looking at cold rolled steel and how we buy cold rolled steel, and depending on how that steel is made, whether it's via electric arc or fossil fuels, it can be a dramatic difference. And we've more dramatic graphs showing how buying differently can impact on carbon. And just picking one material alone, insulation, we can see what the embodied carbon performance is of various products in the market, and therefore start to dictate our design solutions as a result. A couple of slides left. These are just some snapshots of what we're doing in the wider industry and indeed in our company to try and drive transformation. So we're investing heavily in our plant to provide the very latest equipment on our projects. And these are equipped with the next generation of artificial intelligence. Just one example, we've a lot of drive on site around smart sites, smart metering, reducing both cost and carbon and use of electricity, using HVO fuel, and also upgrading our fleet to electric vehicles. The central image there shows that we're part of a new steering group led by the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine, driving the increased use of timber in construction in Ireland. So that's really, really important for us to be driving that change and that opportunity. And lastly, on this slide, as a member of the board of MMC Ireland, we can stay very close to what our industry partners are doing, what we need to do to collaborate with them to drive innovation and break down the silos and barriers that have been traditional in our industry. Finally, with Construct Innovate, as a member of the Centre Steering Committee, You know, I'm proud to be part of that team that Jamie and Magda and Colin have assembled to really try and understand how we can knowledge share in our industry and drive research and collaboration with academia. In the center of this page is an example where we're collaborating with webinars and specifying sustainable concrete, and our collaboration with Trinity, you know, supported by the grant from Construct Innovate, and indeed our own investment supplementing that. And finally, we're part of the Construct Innovate Timber Working Group and are active in promoting offsite timber methodologies. So hopefully, Jamie, that's it from me. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and for listening to a very small part of what is our Breaking New Ground strategy at Sisk. Thank you.
Brilliant. Sarah, thanks, Sarah Jane. There's a lot there, and I'm sure lots of questions from the audience coming in. I see them coming in already. So, but yeah, great to hear about the work going on around NMC, embodied carbon, and you know that emphasis around collaboration between the design team, the contractors, supply chain, but also the academic community as well. And I know you mentioned a couple of times the €50,000 grant from Construct Innovate. Well, actually, there's a new one open as well. So anyone that's any organisation that's a member of Construct Innovate, there's a seed fund call currently open, and for applications up till the end of I think it's up to the end of May. And you can apply for a €50,000 grant to collaborate with the academic community to help support you with your research challenges in there. So if you go on to constructinnovate.ie, you'll find support. If you go in there, you'll find the support there in it, and the seed fund call. Okay, so I might move on to the next presentation, and we'll come back to the Q&A at the very end. So next presentation is from Ronan and Tom. So Ronan Lonergan and Tom Lowry from Cairn's Homes, and they're going to talk about innovation approaches in Cairn's Homes. So over to you guys.
Thanks, Jamie. Yeah, so just quick introductions, obviously, to reiterate what you said. Myself, I'm an architect by background, similar to Sarah Jane. I lead our innovation and pre-construction teams in Cairn, and I'm joined by my colleague, Thomas Lowry, who's a senior technical manager, which is probably the equivalent of design management in terms of the industry. So we probably have a split in the two teams. Some are more centrally based, focused on strategy and product, and then there's the team that are, I suppose, managing projects and dealing with that day to day. I suppose today, in terms of the theme that we've taken for the presentation, is first talking a little bit about how we approach projects and how we define items that we classify as being innovation projects. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about the Cairn Technical Design Library and the design toolkit, which is really a key part of our work last year and formed the part of our ICE award submission for the 2024, of which it was shortlisted. So just take on to the start. So yeah, I suppose the first couple of slides are very much going to focus on high level and how we think about things and how we approach things, and really, I suppose the genesis of this slide is just if you were to really define or to show anyone external to Cairn or even internal what do we classify as innovation or how Cairn innovates. We have a value proposition. So it's really, really important to actually define things that provide value to customers. So I think the difficulty with innovation sometimes is going down that rabbit hole of, well, maybe you probably haven't defined the adequate business case for the product or thing that you're looking at. It might look great, it might sound great, but you actually have to realize, well, is this providing value to my customer or to the people that are going to live in the house, or maybe the local authority or the construction team or the commercial team? And that really allows you to make the best decisions and to pick the best things to pursue. Because obviously, even in our organisation as large as Cairn, we have limited energy and capacity to develop everything. We have values. So really the five of them on the screen there. There would be the product value, our customer experience. We're huge about the customer. We talk about customers like tech team talk about customers in terms of Apple and Amazon and the whole ethos there, because ultimately we're a product delivery company, which is slightly different than a contractor where it's more of a service-based industry. We talk about competitive edge and kind of stepping ahead, and we can really do that on the basis of, I suppose, owning the full value chain of design, procurement and construction together, and trying to get, I suppose, additional synergies and all those. Productivity and assembly, probably the most important thing in terms of innovation. Coming up with new ideas is really, really easy, but trying to do things more quicker and more effectively to ultimately reduce cost is 90% really of what we do. And then obviously ESG is really a core part of how we're thinking about innovation, particularly in the last couple of years with our SBTi targets as a PLC, which would be obligated similar to other publicly traded companies in the UK and Ireland. Similar to Sarah Jane, very much focused on operationally how we deal with our projects. So we're very much, we've come up with a series of gateways in terms of how we think about things passing through. So there's idea, proof of concept, chosen project for due diligence. So that would where we move to a specific location, be that in Kildare or Wicklow or Dublin or Cork. We then road test. So we test in a limited capacity, which would be maybe 10 to 20 units. And then if that's successful, we might approve the particular innovation for more widespread use. So really just trying to isolate that risk. We communicate and we partner. So we don't do everything ourselves. We're really honest and open about that, but we'd like to create a platform to allow other people to deliver great products to the end consumer. And we're kind of part of that end of the value chain life cycle where it's going straight to the homeowner. So there's other people doing great work, like it's on the screen here, Fast House, Kingspan, obviously, Shannon Valley, who are a groundwork company, Daltech, who are an electrical based company. And we're really creating a platform for their great ideas and to integrate them into an end of use, an end of life cycle project. 2023, we targeted a couple of different key projects, one being the Cairn Technical Library, 3-story timber frame duplex, which we developed with Kingspan, which has helped us to reduce our embodied carbon. We carried out a significant amount of passive house research and launched 2 significant 600-unit apartment blocks to the passive house standard, which will hopefully both be delivered in late 2025 and have started early this year. And then in 2024, we have our design toolkits, and unfortunately, the nature of innovation, a couple of things that we actually physically can't mention on the call, but we are going to talk about how we deal with them and how we approach them as a business, just to give you a flavour of what we're doing. So, not going to dwell on this too quickly, but it's really important. Across the top, this slide is supposed to indicate the typical life cycle of a project. And one thing that Cairn has identified, and we do quite well, that probably other people haven't started to do yet, is we actually develop things outside of a project, because ultimately projects have deadlines and timeframes, and innovation rarely follows one step after another. It's really key that we've moved that off to one side. So as and where we've developed new ESG details, new components, new typologies, and when they're primed and ready, then we roll them into a project. We found probably in our early years that when we were trying to maybe move like edge steel onto a project, or maybe timber frame or more eco ways of building, it put immense amounts of pressure on the project, which could potentially kind of affect the start and site date, which is really the core piece of our business and the most important thing. Program really is key. So quickly, just to reiterate that partnership approach, a couple of our partners here on the screen. Kingspan Key with the multi-unit duplex. We were the first client that used that product, and we would have actually developed it with them. It was probably back in early 2022. I would have went to their innovation centre in Kingscourt in County Cavan, which is a very impressive building, and they showed the genesis of what became that product. And really, I think we would both agree, neither of the companies would have got there on their own. It was very much kind of Cairn plus Kingspan together to help drive something that would kind of really improve the product piece for the market and give back something that is also cost effective and easy to build. EcoWall is something that we've initiated out in Parkside, would have originated in the UK. It's very simply a kind of an off-site internal wall panel that gets constructed, and instead of carrying out that work on site, it's staggering amounts of waste reduction related to that product of the order of 80%. So really good win there from an environmental problem point of view as well. VR experience, so we'll be using this for quality management, and we're also using it for some of our customer experiences, just to show them, particularly houses that are maybe being sold off plan and we don't have a show house built yet. TestFit, interesting piece of software from America, which is based on really kind of mathematical problem solving solutions for program for housing in particular. And it once you program in your parameters and what sizes you need, it tends to solve and find those things yourself. So it's early days, but I think there's huge potential for that type of technology to really improve what we're doing. And then Passive House, which I've mentioned previously. So again, just back to that whole operationalizing how we treat projects. We really have 17 resourced priority innovation projects in Cairn. We have 50 plus formally registered ideas. So we have a long list and we have a short list. And we really prioritize constantly in terms of what is the right thing to do at the right stage. We don't invest in everything at once. We try to pick off the 3 or 4 things that we think are maybe close to being landed, or will provide real value to the business or to customers. And naturally enough, we've categorized some of them. So what's those type of categories? Be offsite construction, MMC, maybe digital construction, process, efficiencies, and product. And you can see over on the right-hand side, this is how we really think about things. From a central point of view, me and the team would be developing these ideas up to 75, 80%. And when they're primed and ready to go, we then hand the information over to a project team where they then integrate it into a project, and then they take it the last 25, 30% of the way, which usually is the most difficult bit, that integration piece. It's like fixing the factory floor for a car manufacturer. It requires a lot of effort. The ideas tend to be the simple bit. Just internally to finish up, and then I'll pass over to my colleague Thomas around the library and toolkit. Very much important, fostering culture, which probably echoes some of the things Sarah Jane said in Sisk. We're big on awards and we're big on rewarding people. So there is a monetary gift that goes out as part of this, and there would have been 6 winners last year. The first being a couple of great examples of cost-effective design, both in our low-density housing schemes and apartments, primarily based around, I suppose, one great idea was the roof truss, and actually designing the roof truss around the maximum dimensions of transport in Ireland, which reduced the amount of assembly on site, health and safety risk, and ultimately cost as well. SBTI targets, a huge part of our sustainability report, which is actually, if you want to look it up, released in the last month, and just calls out what our projected roadmap is up until 2030 and how we think we're going to go about doing that. And really the 3-story timber frame duplex, which the Innovate team carried out the first one in Ireland. We think this has just massive potential. I think upwards of 85% of housing is 6 stories or less in Ireland. It's not 6 stories plus. So that's where we see the real kind of commercial benefits in terms of developing. CLT is really great, but we want to see more 4 and 5 story buildings built out of timber. In the long term, we probably see the timber frame manufacturers set up to do that. So with that, I might just pass over to Tom.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Ronan. Just kind of following on from some of Ronan's points. So each idea that's proposed as part of the innovation framework is assessed using a scorecard similar to this. So along the top, running from left to right, is the typical timeline in terms of assessing those ideas, the steps involved, and outlines where in the life cycle any given idea is, and whether it's ready to be rolled out on a chosen site, as Ronan says. We give a brief summary of the idea in the left-hand side. Picked a particularly good one today, 10 out of 10 for this one. And on the right-hand side there, it's a collaborative approach kind of across a mini team essentially assembled to review these ideas. It would comprise usually a technical manager, a QS and somebody from the construction side at a minimum. They'd consider these ideas from different perspectives, with different expertise brought to the table. So we assess the idea under a range of headings there at the bottom right, and give it a RAG status to really try and focus on where we're investing on each of those ideas. So one of those in particular that Ronan mentioned already is the Cairn Technical Design Library. Essentially, it's a repository for design information, our preferred ways of working. It includes chapters and sectors kind of divided up between houses, duplexes, apartments, and within that there's subsections for each package associated with the construction of any of the buildings. Runs through specs, standard details that we want to use, gives quite a bit of prescriptive guidance in terms of what we're looking to achieve on each of the packages. It's made available to every consultant who works on a Cairn project, and is circulated and encouraged to be used by everybody across the Cairn team, across all teams, to try and standardize and streamline the way that we do things, from briefing consultants very early in the process to all the way through to implementing that on site. It's a collaborative approach. As you can imagine, we compiled this looking at the best details probably that we could find across the thousands of units that have been developed over the last number of years. So there's quite a lot of work involved in picking the best of the bunch, and we encourage feedback from even our colleagues on site if something's working quite well or not working, and we can continually evolve the library to keep it updated with that, as well as some of the innovation topics that might be coming out of the idea stage. Because within that technical design library, one subset of that is the standardization toolkit for houses. We've picked on this one. So essentially it's made up of 3 different components. So at a macro level, it's the library of homes. So the example there is a 2-story house. We've gone so far as to brief our consultants with floor plans, sections, elevations, to all kind of compiled with our preferred ways of working, our preferred products, our preferred supply chain embedded within that. It's quite a formulaic approach to delivering a home. The next level down, if you like, are the construction detail libraries, or the Cairn ACDs, as kind of call them sometimes. So standard details. Again, we've been very prescriptive in these and said these are what we have found to work. These work considering building regs, considering program cost, sustainability, everything else. And then right down to a micro level is the component library, where we've drafted standard components such as pods, balconies, kitchen types, items like that. If we go on to the next slide, then there's an example of that for one of our standard house types. So you can see there, we're trying to standardize things as much as possible to streamline design, but also procurement and construction. So we're getting feedback from our supply chain that we're using these type of products on each project going forward. So it's a massive benefit for streamlining not only the design but the procurement process, and quality on site as well. We found them to be very lean as well in terms of, from a sustainability perspective, and just trying to use less essentially across the board. So yeah, we're kind of yeah, it's the last one. So in terms of the different components, again, very prescriptive in terms of typical stereotypes, even down to shower trays, kitchens, roof trusses. It comes a point where when a consultant or a contractor has worked with us across a few projects, they're almost relaying this back to us that this is what you're using here, or why aren't we using this, that, or the other. So it is, I suppose it's a continual process of trying to make things more efficient for everybody, really, with the sustainability and efficiency lens on. That's it from us. Again, I think, like Sarah Jane, a bit of a whistle stop tour.
I think one of the proof points maybe is worth calling out just the toolkit in particular, and we would probably chalk a lot of our efficiencies up to how we approach design. But we did some research in terms of BCAR and using that information, commencement notices and completions. We build 11 weeks quicker than the industry average. And we hit site in a third of the time. So if a site, maybe particular project might take 60 weeks to hit site in terms of pre-construction, maybe wait on planning, commencement notice, it's generally taken us probably 3 months from grant, and sometimes you did an even less. And that really is chalked up to how we approach design. So we're probably seeing a substantial amount of efficiencies in it.
Okay.
That's what I've taken out, but that's probably it. Thanks very much, Jamie.
Thanks, everyone.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ronan. Thanks, Thomas. That's fantastic. Great insight, I suppose, how Cairns assess innovative ideas and use that scorecard to decide to go forward. And then, how you have a library, but it's a library that's evolving and you're learning and improving. But at least people know where you stand and what they're what you're looking for, I suppose, as a company in there. And obviously you're showcasing some of the impacts of that in terms of getting things built quicker, getting to site quicker, and so on. So as I said, any questions, pop them into the Q&A function at the bottom for the guys, and they'll answer them there, or we'll deal with them at the very end of the presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to go on to our third speaker, who's Robert Burns, Chief Executive at Monaghan County Council. Has a very, very strong track record in going into local authorities and really innovating in those local authorities and doing fantastic work, having high impact. So over to you, Robert, to give us your insights from the local authority experience.
Okay, thanks, Jamie. So it's having a few problems with on the technical side of things, so I'm going to try and see will the presentation run from my share screen. So Jamie and Niamh, you might let me know if the visuals are okay there.
Well, it's in the presenter mode, so maybe Niamh, would you be able to present it from your side?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Niamh will run it for you, Robert.
That's okay, yeah. So thanks, Niamh.
No, are you able to see that okay?
Okay.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, again, thank you. Okay, so so first of all, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks to Engineers Ireland and Construct Innovate for inviting me to speak. It's a privilege, and I've learned a lot from the last two speakers and presentations. Really great work being done between Sisk and Cairn, and just generally this whole ecosystem, if you like, around innovation, which is, of course, more than modern methods of construction. That's something I'll be touching on. But just a little bit about myself. I am civil engineer by profession, if you like, probably working in project management, senior management for quite a few years now, but that is my background. I am Chief Executive of Monaghan County Council now, but before that I was Director of Housing and Community in Fingal, which is one of the largest local authorities in Ireland, and we did a huge amount of work in housing. And I'd like to think we were very innovative in how we went about it, and indeed worked with Cairn on a number of projects, so Ronan and his team. So, and there'll be a lot of interaction between the public and private sectors. People mightn't appreciate that, and it's something I am going to touch on, and maybe more than touch on in my presentation. So I think, it's probably useful in terms of where I'm coming in this order of presentations. I'm coming at it from the local authority perspective, so public sector. But I'm also perhaps coming as Chief Executive and Director, more practical, saying, well, how does this work? And have we got examples of where we've done it already? And what does the future look like? And what are those steps that we can take? Because I'm conscious there's quite a wide audience on this webinar today, and a lot of people trying to understand where they go with innovation, modern methods of construction, and it's deeper and wider than that. We know that. And perhaps maybe just what I go through today, maybe give a flavor of that. So next slide, please. Yeah, I guess important to point this out at the start. Yes, I'm here to talk about innovation and construction, but that's not necessarily my role or my primary role. My role is essentially around the social impact. What can innovation do that essentially serves the greater good and has a social impact? It's not innovation for innovation's sake. And and I work in the public sector, so very different perhaps to the previous speakers. My remit isn't about generating value or generating a profit. Mine is quite different. So I have a lot of different considerations. I always think it's useful to look at words and what they mean, and are we using them in the right way, and perhaps a preferred or an established use has come about. But that's the definition of innovation, or to innovate. And to make changes, I really think it's interesting in something established, especially when introducing new methods, ideas, or products. And I'll come to something close to the end around what I think is the true meaning of innovation, but I'll continue on. Modern methods for construction, again, it's a term we're all becoming very used to, and they become a little bit hackneyed at times. And I think that has actually been one of the challenges around language, with the different forms of accelerated type construction, if we call it that. Modern methods is now seen to be that catch-all term. But what does it mean? And I know our own government guidance has given us that around the MMC, the 7 categories, and I won't go into that today. But you know, it's important, I suppose, just to note that it's quite wide-ranging. It's more than just the materials or the forms of constructions. It's methods, it's processes, it's around the resources. In many ways, it's around those strategic challenges. And I guess, I'm not sure that I've heard it mentioned earlier, but for me, one of the main reasons for MMC, or for this form of construction, is strategic challenges we have around labour and the supply of labour, in particular the supply of a certain type of labour, skilled labour. And within that, even the wet trade. So this is largely a response to a strategic constraint around labour supply. It's other things, but that to me is one of the main motivations. But just look at the terms that have been there. And I'm long enough around to have seen different iterations. And often when something is considered to be devalued in some way or debased, or a term that's overused, we find it changes. And that's what has happened, I believe, in this case. It's not that there's anything wrong with that, but you know, technically some of the modern methods of construction we see are prefabricated construction. But we won't use that term because it has connotations. We think of those drafty prefabs, you know, in the schoolyard that we went to, or you know, some very low value type of accommodation. So language matters, and that's why the term, in my view, seems to change over time. It also could be that when we talked about things like accelerated construction, I remember a scheme that Dublin City set up with trial locations, pilot locations, and it didn't work out as intended, and that hurt the idea, the concept of accelerated construction. So it's very interesting to see how we use language around this, and how that language gets updated when it's in response to challenges. And I guess the preferred term around it is probably modern methods of construction. And that's fair because it's capturing a lot. But you know, volumetric, modular, panelized construction, off-site manufacturing. Technically, a lot of MMC, if you're talking about the physical making of things, is an off-site manufacturing process. And that's really interesting when you look to harness the skills and the value in other sectors. And that's something we'll be very conscious of in Monaghan. Next slide, please. So again, maybe bringing it down to something that's tangible, or an example, and maybe to explain some of the things that we've been doing in Monaghan County Council. I mean, it's not new, you know, modern methods of construction. It's been around a long time. Timber frame is with us since, what, the 90s. 2000s gotten better in terms of reliability, standards, quality. But we have been dealing with some form of accelerated way of providing housing for a time. And this is just a case study of an estate in Castleblaney, where we worked in partnership with a developer and a modular homes manufacturer to complete 26 2-story, 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom houses. And this was done in 2020. So we're doing this during COVID and are finishing off on it. And you can see it's using light gauge steel and a volumetric type of construction, modular units. And the next few slides will go through it in a bit more detail. So again, this would be taken as a given that we are getting excellent quality control in the factory conditions. But the feedback we were getting is that, you know, if you're getting that excellent quality, you have a consequent reduction in the number of snags and defects, and that's what our experience was. And the construction period was really exceptional, I have to say that, and I use that word deliberately. There are not many 26-unit developments that are being completed in 9 months, and that was completed to a very high standard. And so each house was comprised of 6 volumetric modules and delivered by large goods vehicles and cranes into place. And I do refer to the equipment and the handling, because that's actually an important part of trying to accelerate modern methods of construction. Is looking at how materials get handled and get moved, because you're looking at bulky, quite heavy materials and having to move them from a factory environment to a less controlled construction site. And again, if there's one thing we're very good at in Monaghan, it's at materials handling, and that has become a feature of product development within some of the companies based on Monaghan. And then the external blockwork, render, and roof covering was completed on site. So next slide, please. And that's just the if you have completed units. And again, this is really interesting, because when I bring councillors out to see this, or members of the public or others who are interested in, explain the idea of modular, and in their mind they think modular is something less, or else I can tell the difference between modular construction and traditional construction. Somehow it's a lower grade, if you like. It's a yellow packed version of housing. And I think these images and the reality of looking at this site shows that actually modern methods of construction, modular construction, delivers high quality housing that may be indistinguishable from traditional build, and you've got all the other advantages. Next slide. And this is just some images of the internal, which is nothing unusual, but the caveat here is that all the fixtures, fittings, and finishes were completed in the factory. So these units were delivered on site, and that's really where the extra value is coming in terms of shortening the time frame and reducing costs. But that 9-month time frame was probably only possible because a lot of the internal work being done in a controlled factory environment and shipped to site. Next slide, please. Again, second case study is probably kind of, it's MMC 1.0, the very early versions of modular construction, if you like, or accelerated delivery, and its use of timber frames. And this is a project where we worked with the architects, the designers, and the contractors, and that was really important, that this was very much a collaborative effort. And another feature of what we had to deal with in Monaghan was, prevalence of derelict, unfinished estates. We had 40 unfinished estates in Monaghan. Thankfully, we were nearly at the end of them. And through Monaghan's efforts, 38 of them have been brought back into use. But that has been the state essentially dealing with what was an overhang from private sector investment, or misguided private sector investment in the 2000s. So the state often has to come in and deal with these very difficult sites because no one else will. And this is where the social impact really matters, because leaving derelict sites is very harmful, very detrimental to communities, as well as preventing or not having the housing in place as well. So just the total budget. So we had to finish off the 2 derelict houses and then build 28 new houses. And then we chose timber frame as the form of construction within this. And I'll come to it later on. It's very much an established form of construction in Monaghan. Some of the market leaders in timber frame construction are from Monaghan. And my understanding is about between 30 and 40% of timber frame panelized construction is manufactured in Monaghan alone, and a much higher proportion will be manufactured in the northeast between Cairn and Lowry. So it's very much a centre of excellence, if you like, around modern methods of construction, modular construction. So next slide, please. Again, that's just a list of things, and I'm going to leave that. Hopefully the slides will be sent around, but sometimes getting under the bonnet of these things and understanding what's actually happening, the sequence of events. Again, very much traditional form, not controversial at all. But when this started out in the late 90s, 2000s, there was huge difficulties around timber frame construction, almost because of the difficulties in assembling these units in a very safe and quality-oriented way on site. It almost sounded the death knell for timber frame, and there was nothing wrong with the processes. And we should be thankful that, you know, those standards got put in place. There was a uniformity around and consistency, and it meant that this, which is a very sustainable and effective and quick form of construction, has really flourished, and perhaps is coming into its own if we bring in, you know, if we add, you know, the timber frame now to panelize the volumetric construction. I think there's great potential there. Next slide. And we can see the advantages of timber frame construction. You can say it's the advantages of MMC, but I'll just touch on a few things in there. But this whole issue of site labor, it's fundamental. Anyone who goes out on a site or listens to contractors, this is what you're hearing. And there's not much prospect of having those wet trades coming back again, the plasters and block layers. So we have a different future, and how we respond to that will be critical in terms of how we provide housing. A lot of other areas around sort of efficiency, facilitating follow-on trades, whole area of circular economy, managing resources, managing waste is critical. Again, this is obviously using controlled environments, manufacturing processes which rely on agile and lean methods of manufacturing. We're driving down waste and maximizing the use of resources. And again, some of the other benefits, probably not as well known, is around, well, if you can reduce the amount of on-site construction and ad hoc type of activity and reduce your time on site, you reduce your exposure in terms of health and safety and to liability, and indeed to inclement weather as well, if you can time it in such a way. So next slide. So what are we doing in Monaghan County Council to try and encourage the use of modern methods of construction? So what we do, we link in and we tie in with our architects who are very much active in the county. So again, like most areas, there's a certain number of architects who will be active. And we try and work with them around the projects we have coming up. And we're really focusing on things like, well, fine, we can go into a greenfield site and we can do standard construction. Because let's face it, MMC, the standard kind of traditional form with using timber frame, is really suited to something, you know, that's 15 to 30 units per hectare. Once you go past that, it becomes a little bit more complex. You're looking for more density, and when you have got height as well, so you're definitely moving more into that volumetric space. But we're really interested in how we can deal with regeneration and brownfield sites and infill, and we are challenging architects to come up with solutions that use the best principles of MMC, but allow us to have a bespoke solution within a town centre location. That's a challenge. In fact, in some ways, it's a contradiction, but that's what we're asking our consultants to do. Again, we encourage early consultation between designers and manufacturers, and always having meetings where possible. So we would actually bring sometimes manufacturers out onto site to look at a site at an early stage, even if we didn't have architects in place, because we were wanting to know, you know, what their views are. Maybe they have done work that's similar. Maybe they can look at solving these problems with us. But it's a collaborative approach. We also look to learn from previous projects. Did we use traditional form or a certain type of MMC when we could have used something else? So there's a look back, a lessons learned approach. It's also very much a holistic approach across the county. We have a climate action plan. We have a circular economy plan. We have to make sure that we're complying with all of that and ensuring that we deal with things in the round, because the days of just going off and building in whatever way we want in any place that we want are gone. We have to do it in a very sustainable way. And at this point in time, design and build is our preferred form of contract. And in all of our tenders, we include specific reference to MMC and the use of MMC. So we're giving strong signals to the market about what we want to see in Monaghan. And Monaghan is home to some of the largest MMCs and companies in Ireland. And we have strong relationships with many of them, and we're looking to develop those relationships, the ones we have, and to develop relationships with new companies. So next slide, please. And these are just some of them. Some of these are household names, well-known. Kingspan Century, that were mentioned earlier by the Cairn presentation. But Kingspan brought up Century Homes, which Century Homes is one of the largest timber frame manufacturers in Ireland. So that's why Kingspan have such a strong track record in this area. IJM, one of the major timber frame companies in Ireland. Buildright, specialising in a lot of concrete, modular and MMC form of construction, and Volumetric, which has taken over Integra, which is a relatively new company, but they are a major multinational in the US, and they have decided to locate their intellectual elements, their design elements here in Monaghan, even though they're manufacturing abroad. And CombiLift, while they're not primarily involved with construction, they are actually a major part of this story, and they have developed really fantastic projects, bespoke projects, to support modular construction and material handling. And we're very proud of Monaghan that we have this advanced manufacturing infrastructure ecosystem, and we have strong MMC companies, and they are feeding off one another. The ideas are coming through from ourselves, they're coming through from the industry, they're coming through from construction. And again, in Monaghan, we feel we're a very entrepreneurial county, and innovation is really a part of our DNA. So next slide, please. Again, this is just what we're coming up. This is just a range of 2 schemes. Just recently announced, we've gotten our first stage of approval, but we will be going through a design and build form of procurement on those. We'll be using modern methods of construction. What exactly we'll be doing is still to be decided. But obviously, the benefits are there to be seen, and I think most of you would understand that there are a lot of benefits around design and build. The primary one is that you're bringing in the innovation, you're bringing in the contractor in the early state to help define the solution. The downside, of course, of design and build is that the client loses control to a degree over quality, and that can be an issue. So there has to be a balancing there. It also means that there's a lot of work done at the front end before you get to site, so you can have a longer schedule in terms of lead-in time, but overall it does result in a reduced time schedule for the complete project. But I guess we are invested in Monaghan in the idea of collaboration, bringing in designers, bringing in suppliers, bringing in contractors to get the benefit of their knowledge and in innovation. That drives down the time schedule, the cost, and also should result in a better product. One of the challenges we have is actually to deal with local architects and consultants and convince them that it is a good idea. So we're actually having a piece of work to do around communicating and raising awareness, and I suppose communicating what we want, what we would like to see. And we're a fairly large house builder. We're probably the largest house builder in Monaghan. That's the reality when you live in a sort of rural or regional location. So it's important, the signal that we send. And this is critical in terms of the sector generally, because the more local authorities are doing, the more house builders are doing, the more construction firms that are supporting MMC, the more sustainable that sector and that industry will be, because one of the challenges they have is that around certainty, consistency, ensuring there's a pipeline of projects into the future. So next slide. I'll try and go through these quickly, and it's more just not to just focus on housing, because we believe that regeneration is actually one of the most innovative processes that we're involved in, and it's a key part of what we're doing. All of you know around the challenges we have in our towns and villages and cities in Ireland. Old buildings, derelict buildings, an old purpose can't be used right now or can't be used in the future. So we have to reimagine the spaces and the buildings. Here's just an example of what we're doing in Monaghan town. Really exciting development, our new Peace Campus, 70 and 80 million euro project on the site of an old machinery yard in Monaghan town. And think about the positive impact that that's going to have for the town. I do. And, another life for that site, repurposing. And that is, in my way, really what innovation is about, is that renewal. The next slide. Again, this is a project we're extremely proud of. I think it's been nominated for the IC Awards. One of the Broomfield Construction have put that forward. This was an old derelict former gate lodge at Lochmockno Estate in Castleblaney, and that's been transformed, it was refurbished and extended, become a state-of-the-art library for Castleblaney. And that is innovation in truth. It's not just about the processes and the construction. It's saying that building had an old use. It's not going to be used for that anymore. How do we bring it back to life? How do we extend that? And how do we have that social impact? So, we've had a 400% increase in library users and footfall since it opened. And it's something we're very proud of. It's in a great location, and it's really adding to the town. It's increasing footfall for Castleblaney, bringing more people into the town and into the park. And this, to me, is, again, really re-emphasize that point around innovation. It should be doing those things. It should be having that economic and social impact. And then I think it's the last slide. So just to come back, I'm no scholar in Latin, but cursory look in Google I found that innovare, which is the root of innovation, that word that we use in English now, means to renew or to change. And that's where I think our focus should be in terms of innovation, not so much always looking at the detail or always looking at technology or digitization to give us those changes. We should look at it more in the round and see, can we carry out those works? Can we complete housing? Can we have an impact or do work in the built environment that has that profound social and economic impact that benefits our society? So thank you. Sorry, maybe run over a little bit